Welcome back to the Growing Band Director Podcast. This is episode number 118. I'm here with Jackson Smith, as band director and chair of the music department at Menasha High School in Wisconsin. Did I get that right?
Yep, you got it.
Yeah. You're the third person from Wisconsin I've talked to. I was Chris Behrens from Beloit I was with, and Matthew Arau from Lawrence University.
I love Matthew. He's a friend of mine. We just did a clinic at Lawrence last March. It's an awesome place.
What was it about?
It was just our middle school bands, seventh grade bands, did a day trip, and we did some clinics with their music ed students. And Matthew then rehearsed the bands, and we did lunch on campus. And it was like a 5-hour trip, but it was super awesome. And it was the week before our concert, so it was perfect.
Yep. So Jackson and I are hanging today because Jackson, like everybody else, does it all at his school, right? You're the band director there, doing everything from the nose flute ensemble to the jazz band to everything else.
That's right.
We're talking a lot about young percussionists and percussion gear and basically percussion for the non-percussionists today. But first, can we start with the story about your new school and what's so special about it?
Yeah, that's awesome. So I am brand new at my new school, so Menasha High School. Some of your listeners will recognize the city Appleton, Wisconsin. We're right there. We're 5 minutes from Appleton, essentially. And it is about 1,000 kids at the high school, and I am the director of bands at the high school. I'm the only band director at the high school. Mm-hmm. I was previously in Pulaski, Wisconsin for 5 years, and I've just taken this role, which I'm super excited about. Menasha High School, interestingly, it's one of the oldest, we think it's one of the oldest public school band programs in the country. I've got some files and pictures, black and white pictures and news articles from the early 1920s. And there was a competitive street marching band at that time. But it's just it's an awesome place. We've got great kids. The interesting story is that in terms of gear and percussion and working with students, if you are a non-percussionist, is that I'm the fourth band director at this high school in 5 years. And those years have come directly before COVID, during COVID, and now this year.
Wow.
And so pre-COVID, and furthermore, it's a new high school principal and a new superintendent who are both great. It sounds like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of problems, but I really love those two, and there seems to be a lot of support. But the point is that pre-COVID, we marched, I believe it was about 110 in a high school of 1,000, which is pretty good. And now this year, last year they had 7 students in the marching band, which is not really a marching band. It's more of like a marching ensemble. But this year we've got 28, and we are trending up. I've been picking up kids left and right. So that's really exciting. But when I got my keys in June, the whole point that I reached out to you and said, this is kind of interesting, is that none of my predecessors were percussionists, and I don't blame them at all, but I don't think they really knew what we had or what is good and what is needing repair and all of that stuff. So I have spent 3 months working with my students and working individually to organize and sort out what needs to be what. And so I reached out to you and said, hey, this is kind of interesting. Yeah. I've never heard this as a topic of percussion for the non-percussionist. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to chat about it today.
I love it. So one of the things I did a couple of years ago, we got a grant, and it was like $800 or something. And we went to Lowe's, and they basically donated a bunch of stuff and everything. And then I custom built shelves, so for all the storage in my band room. So one of the coolest things that I like is a cork board. I don't know if you've used a cork board before, but the ability to have a big cork board, and then basically everything is hanging that can hang. There's so much great percussion stuff. You're right. You don't have to be a percussionist to be an effective percussion teacher.
Right. We added 2. I guess I have pegboards. Do you have? Is it a cork?
That's what I meant. That's what I meant. A pegboard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we added 2 pegboards. The band room, there was a shelf, like a weirdly low shelf in the back by the percussion section, but no storage underneath. It was just a shelf, and so kids just put all of their stuff on it. It just became a catch-all, and
Yeah.
it was a mess. So I had them take that out, and then I had them mount 2 pegboards, and so now our tambourines are hanging and our bass drum mallets, and it looks great. You know, it looks neat and tidy, um, and the kids were geeked out about it. You know, like, oh, all their stuff was in the percussion cabinet. We couldn't find anything, and now it's all here.
Yeah.
So yeah,
One thing that's cool about those shelves, I have a shelf too, a low shelf. It's like maybe 16 inches off the ground, but it's one of those white metal wire shelves that you have in shelving in your closet at home.
Oh yeah.
So what's cool about it is like the mallets go through, so you can like take all the extra mallets and like kind of line them up and kids can see them and stuff. So you know, it's little stuff like that, right? When it comes to the storage.
Yeah,
So
totally.
let's start talking about young percussionists. So, and we
Great.
say young in experience, not necessarily young students, but young in anything. So you're a believer, as I am, that anybody can do this. Anybody can teach percussion. So
right. Yeah. And I guess I could have said off the top that I'm not a classically trained percussionist. I am all my classical training is in trombone performance. And then from the age of 10, I was a drum set player. I've played in various bands, you know, middle school talent show to festivals up where I live for Packer games to playing in a cover band, a garage band in high school, and playing in jazz in high school and college. And so by circumstance and necessity, I have now become a band director, but I've picked up and combined my drum set experience with my other, you know, techniques classes and all my other things. And then by circumstance, I guess I've been the percussion instructor in my 2 districts so far. And so the message I'm hoping to share is that if you do not think of yourself as a percussionist, you can still be, like you said, a very effective percussion teacher. And it just takes a little bit of effort and energy to learn about what you've got and learn how to do it well. And then anyone can do it.
Let me just speak briefly a little bit about my experience. First of all, in Westbrook, we start kids on mallets. And then I believe, you know, as the literature comes in, then partway through that first year, at some point, they can start playing some snare drum and things like that. But we don't start 45 kids on snare drum. And then also at the high school level, we're very fortunate. We have a separate percussion class for our lower band, right? So kids come in, we have a concert band and wind ensemble. And in the concert band, they either take the wind class or the percussion class. So it's just another section that was easy for the guidance department. So with that, I have my, whatever it is, 6 to 8 percussionists in that band. And we literally have 75 minutes every other day where we can just do percussion stuff. I mean,
that's killer.
So we can do the Garwood Whaley timpani methods, you know, like we just did a test a couple days ago and we had Staying Alive going on at the same time and like just help them keep steady beat, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's like mallet technique or you're dealing with snare pads, you know, like what is it, the Tommy Igoe warm up and syncopation, you know, reading, like you can do all the percussion things when you're able to have that class. So I treat it very differently because of that.
Yeah, I think you've touched on, and you're very fortunate. Sounds like in your district that you're got the support and the ability to create that section. So can you explain relative to that every other day? Is that opposite your large ensemble? So it's the percussionists are double dipping, or is it?
Nope.
How is that done?
Nope, that's their band class. They don't meet with the wind players.
Oh, wow.
We do, and because of that, I mean, this is our lower band, so we're not usually past the grade 3 level. Sometimes we'll reach a 4, but usually it's like 2.5, 3, 3.5. So I have to choose a lot of lit that I know I can do A plus B. You know, if it's super integral, then that's a harder piece to do. You know, I will get them in for a couple of rehearsals, and especially a dress rehearsal beforehand. But usually I find that if the percussion section that I have has rehearsed, they've learned the parts and they've rehearsed with the recording. You know, we have like big speaker on there so they know the wind parts.
Yep.
And then vice versa too. Our wind section will hear the full recordings a couple times so that they have an idea about who we're listening to. And I'll have them write in, okay, in measure 48, write in triangle because that's who we're following, or write in timpani or whatever it is. So it's worked so well for us. I mean, it's definitely not perfect. I'd rather they had both. But I'd rather them have the time to really develop, because then when they're ready, they move to our older group, the wind ensemble, and they're back in the full band, and they can function so much better. So
are they coming from the middle school? Are they coming from a full ensemble situation?
Yep. Yeah, my wife is a fantastic middle school teacher, and she teaches all the middle school kids, and they have a full band period, but they have a chance to like do some pull-out sectionals most of the time. So they definitely have shorter sectionals than that, but not,
Sure.
it's mainly full band.
Yeah. I think that's really the ticket, regardless of how you do it and how your building schedule looks or when you can get the kids, is the percussionist, because there's so much to know when you are,
Hmm.
before you hit that advanced group, or even still when you hit that advanced group, you're a junior or senior in high school, whatever. They do need that individual attention. So whether if it's middle school level, you've got a sectional. My previous district, they were once a week during their recess time once they hit seventh and eighth grade band. And then the sixth grade classes were team taught. So they, we had, one teacher would take the percussionist, one teacher would take the flutes, and then occasionally we'd combine and do some reading and some exercises. But it was mostly separate instruction, and that worked really well because you can dip into those technique books and um, really really work slowly on what they need to know so that when they're back in a real situation, if you want to call it, they're ready to cook.
They can function, yeah.
Right.
So I try to divide my time into 4 basic things in that percussion class. I usually deal with like timpani and then pad work, all the snare drum stuff, and then mallet time, and then sort of ensemble stuff. Now, I can't squeeze everything in every day, and that obviously doesn't deal with all the auxiliary stuff. We
Yeah.
usually do a unit where we're learning like multiple percussion etudes and things like that, and that's where we'll all play tambourine and whatever. I've had as many as like 10 kids in this class, and we're literally all playing timpani at the same time, right?
Yeah,
So
that's great.
like everybody gets in a crack, and then we basically have extra pads set up. So like they're playing too, but they're dampening just like they're on a pad, and I mean they're on a timpani and all that. Or we're all playing crash cymbals. We might have 6 pair, but there's 7 kids. Well, the 7th kid is like literally playing. They have their hands and they're playing.
Right.
Just like they have it. It's like a mental thing as much as anything.
It totally is. Yeah.
It's so funny
Totally is.
the amount of times we finished a timpani piece and it's like whole note 1, 2, 3, 4 dampen. They have to say dampen at the end or else they don't remember
Right.
to do it.
That's right.
In mallet stuff, we do a lot of like reading technique stuff. But it's the biggest thing to me because so many kids, are like not mallet players in air quotes.
Right.
So
Yes, and that reminds me of something. Finish what you're saying, and then I've got something here.
okay, so my huge thing that I learned a bunch of years ago that helps kids like mallets is I then will do some custom duet, trio, quartet arrangements just for mallet instruments that are all based on pop tunes. So they're playing like
nice.
what makes you beautiful or I won't give up or whatever easy tune, and you can write it so that it's like 2 mallet or 3 mallet, like make it super playable.
Right.
You can I've done it in 4-part where like the bass clef is the bottom part. So like your advanced kid is like reading the bass clef part or whatever
Awesome.
you need to do. So the pop
Like
music thing
on
to me is,
marimba or something.
yeah, the pop music thing to me is huge to get a lot of those kids to buy into mallets.
Yeah, that's cool. I hadn't heard about that, but that's a great idea. The thing I was gonna say when you said some kids are not mallet players or some kids are not whatever, they percussionists they're like creatures of habit. They pick their lane and then they want to stick into it, and you have to sort of gently wean them into another track. I think that is a critical thing in terms of your setup and your tradition or whatever you want to call it within your percussion section, is to start them as soon as you get them going in 6th grade or 5th grade or whenever you start, that everyone will learn everything. And it's critical that the sentence that I say is that good percussionists play it all. And I have currently a class of high schoolers that I've just gotten as my new students here in Menasha, and they are really stuck in their lane. And so that's going to be my goal, is to train them and wean them off. But we have a flex hour in the day. It's a half an hour flexible time where I'm able to pull a sectional together and we can start doing some of that much needed work on, maybe for some of them, this is a timpani and this is how you operate it, and this is how you put it away, and what are these various mallet instruments? I've never played mallets because I always play bass drum. Well, not anymore. Everyone was going to learn everything.
Yeah, and they have to find some success on it, right? I mean, and it is natural, and every percussionist I've talked to says this. There are kids who are going to always, in their mind, kind of be mallet players, but
Right.
they have to be functional on everything. Even
Hmm.
they can still have a lane, but they need to like be able to change lanes,
Right. Yeah. Right. Your former piano. It's always the former piano players for me.
right?
The mallets are easy, and everybody else thinks mallets are hard, and so they feel cool
Hmm.
that they can play really well and they can read.
One thing I've done, again, I have the luxury of having that class, but like,
Yeah.
if you do a piece like Bach Prelude and Fugue in B flat major, like a great piece that has just a timpani part, I did that one year and I had like 8 new percussionists. I'm like, okay,
Ooh.
fine. So, well, literally, I just wrote a part that fits the harmony of the chords, and
Yeah.
it's all like F in the right hand, B flat in the left hand, like whole
Yep.
notes,
Yep.
and then G in the left hand, B flat in the right hand. Like you make it super simple,
Yep.
and you can do like an easy part, a harder part, and things like that, and just giving them plenty to do and making sure they're rhythmically challenged, I think is
Right.
really big, or they're going to cause problems.
Yes, they are.
They just are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, let's start talking gear. So was it
Ooh, wait.
2022?
Hold
Oh,
on a sec.
yeah.
Can I say one more thing? Just a plug on a really great methods book for young percussionists, like
Do it.
beginner
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
second year.
Yep.
It's the Steve Graves method. I don't know if you do you know Steve Graves.
I know the name.
I don't know him, but that's the book that we used in Pulaski. My colleague Colleen Marlar recommended it, and it's great. So the book is called Drums, Keyboards, and More
Yep.
by Steve Graves, and it does kind of what we're talking about, but it is a curriculum that can be followed at individual percussion class or just a lesson structure that takes kids through this is this. What are the important things to know? Let's play a little easy thing. Now let's go back and combine with the other thing. It's just
Hmm.
laid out really well. So
Is
I don't know Steve. He doesn't endorse me or whatever, but
yeah.
we used it, and I think it's really a wonderful method.
Is it a book that's for percussion classes or can be used in conjunction?
I think it's just for separate percussion instruction. I
Yeah.
don't know that it has a companion method for winds. I doubt it.
But it could be,
Um,
it could be one on one. It could be like with one kid
yeah,
or
right.
a
Yeah,
class.
right. It could. I think it's if you've got 7 tambourines, for every kid, then you obviously have
Yeah.
them all work at the same time.
But you can do it. For those watching, you take your left hand out like this, and then you take your right hand and you
That's
play it
right.
and you shake it. I mean,
Right. That's
you can,
right. The invisible tambourine.
yeah, you can make stuff up. That's great. Okay, so 2022, you started your company, Smith Percussion Services. What was that all
Yeah.
about?
I wouldn't even call it a company. It was
Okay,
I mean I guess it's a company. I paid taxes on it, but
it's a company.
yeah, okay. So it was just kind of a hobby. So when I was new in my previous district in Pulaski, we had what we called the scary cabinets. And some of you may have the scary percussion cabinets full of broken pieces and toppers to stands and dust and old cymbals they're so old that you can't see the markings anymore, and just or snare drums that are missing a snare strainer or whatever it is, cabinets full of junk basically. And we had two of them, and I took it upon myself to meticulously go through the cabinets and sort out what was good and what was not, and most of it was not. But we did find a 70s Ludwig Maple field drum that just needed new heads. Beautiful.
Cool.
Um, and we found like a 60s copper over brass Slingerland 10 lug concert snare
Mm,
that it needed work, needed a new strainer. I had to find that original piece, but it's we found a lot of good stuff, and got rid of a lot of junk, and made room for much needed storage and all that sort of stuff. So I did that process, and it was just part of my job as the percussion instructor, someone who was knowledgeable
mm-hmm,
about this stuff.
mm-hmm.
And eventually we looked around, and I had gone through the entire inventory, and I had serviced the timpani, and we got new heads on that. And, I researched and ordered us a new drum set. So I went through the whole program, and now that program's got basically everything they need for the size. And one of my colleagues looked at me one day and said, "You should do this as a job. This is a service that people could use."
Mm-hmm.
Because she just said, "I would not know where to even start with this, and you do, and I'm just letting you do it." So I put some feelers out there about exactly that. Who has got scary closets full of stuff, or who just needs maintenance done and doesn't have time or the knowledge to do it. And I had a couple schools in Wisconsin hit me up, and so I serviced two high schools and a college, and I offered like a free consultation. I would just go there and, you know, render an opinion, I guess, on
Mm-hmm.
what you've
Mm-hmm.
got and what you need. And then if you need any maintenance done, I do that too. So that went really well. And what I learned from it is that, again, I'm not a percussionist, but I just can do research and work with the resources that I've got, and it's doable. So um, I think it was valuable. I no longer have time to do it with my new position because I've got
Mm-hmm.
a whole school's worth of stuff to do here.
Sure.
But yeah, it
Uh,
was cool.
And I'll just say, if anybody just does, you just do a Google search of an image of percussion storage, you can find so many cool ideas, and then
Hmm.
find somebody who can build it. Like when I built our cabinet, like all of our cymbals go into these like wooden sleeve, like vertical, so you can see all your cymbals rather than
Perfect.
having them stuck somewhere. Anyway, and we're going to provide this whether you're watching it on YouTube or listening to the podcast. There'll be the link down below in the show notes. You have two documents that are going to be available for people. One is their band program equipment assessment template, which basically seems like you have listed basically, everything that you would tend to need or want.
Right. And it is broken down by level.
Yep.
In it's some of it is a must have, like obviously two good functioning concert snare drums with should be different depths and ideally different materials, and obviously at least one functioning bass drum, concert bass drum. Like there's standard things, but then there's some wish list things like if you're going to program some John Mackey and you need some of these different toys and cool things
Mm-hmm.
at a high school level, this is a list that you can look and just go through and, yep, I've got that. I've got that. Ooh, what is that thing? I should Google it and find out what it is. And maybe I've got some pieces in my library that I haven't ever programmed because I don't own, even know what's an example, Crotales,
A nice bell. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Or, yeah, something really odd.
Yeah. And sometimes they're not even that expensive.
No, no.
Yeah.
Some of the that aux stuff is very affordable, but you
Yeah.
have to have a reason to have it.
Sure. And then the other piece of paper is what you call your one sheet.
Yeah, it's not really one sheet. It's
a
a
one and a half
sheet,
sheet.
sheet and a half. But the term one sheet, I have heard. I think it was this podcast that I've heard one sheet used before.
Okay.
Maybe just like when you're working on a piece of music and it's a sheet with common rhythms and
Like a companion guide.
yeah, like a
Yeah. Yeah.
companion guide.
Yeah.
So
One sheet. Okay.
I call it a one sheet.
Yep.
I make them for my middle school if I don't have them because you learn the piece twice as fast if you've got something.
I'm
like
totally
that.
in the middle of that right now. It's amazing.
Yeah. So if do we want to talk briefly about what that is in case people don't know what we're talking about?
The
or-
one sheet, like the companion guide, or yours?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like just a general. You can go ahead and explain maybe.
Yeah, so I call a companion guide or a one sheet. Basically, you take a piece of music and you basically circle what do I think my kids need to work on to do this piece. So for me, I'm doing it on St. Petersburg March, and I chose the first and second theme. And I actually literally put on this one the melody, the harmony, the accompaniment, and the bass line for everybody. So then we could like learn all four parts, let them choose, make an ensemble, and then they obviously learn the piece so much faster. And then we did the same thing with the second theme. Sometimes you just go, okay, here's the stuff these sections need to work on. Like if this is a flute part that my flutes will be able to play, I usually don't put it on the companion guide or the one sheet. But if it's something I know my kids are going to need help with, if you have it all on one sheet of paper, front and back or whatever, and hand it to them, you can always refer to it.
Right. Yeah, I've made probably 10. Yeah, I haven't been teaching for that long, but I've made 10 that have been really successful. And it can also it can be really great when you're working with you've chosen a piece of music to specifically work on a new rhythmic concept. It's like working on dotted quarter eighth or dotted eighth 16th. And you can work that into a comprehensive lesson about this rhythmic concept. And so then it's taken out of the context and it's easier to digest. And then when it goes back into the context, they've got it without
Completely.
having to stop the rehearsal and be frustrated about, we just worked on this, 20 minutes ago on the board. Why can't you do it? Well, provide the anyways,
Yeah.
we're straying off topic.
Yeah,
That's a
no,
one
that's
sheet or a
okay. But
companion guide.
I just wrote down on my notes. You have those like still available?
The ones that I've made,
The one that you made, the ones that you made.
yeah, I do. I'd have to dig them out of my Google Drive.
Well, if you have them, if you share
Yeah,
them with me,
yeah.
I have a little list going, and I'll put yours in the ones that mine, and I'll put that on the show notes too.
Oh, great.
So if
Yeah, we
anybody
can do
wants
that.
to access all the great work you have done, we can include
Okay.
that. Yeah,
Sure. And I do want to I'll name drop just briefly. I do not want to take credit as a sole individual. I am a sole band director now, but my last 5 years have been working with a great team.
sure.
Colleen Marler and Michelle Hensland and Tim Kozlowski in Pulaski, Wisconsin, I've worked closely with them on lots of this stuff. So
Right.
it's a group. When you have a group, it's a real group effort, and I want to make sure that they get some credit for some of this stuff too.
Wonderful. So on the one sheet, you basically have the, buy nice or buy twice, and you have
Oh, right.
all these great brands of all the things. So yeah, you don't need to be a member to see this stuff. So it's going to be on there. You've got some links on, YouTube videos and like care guide for Ludwig and timpani and all that sort of stuff. So I'll urge, rather than us going all the way through that, I'll urge people to kind of click on that and take it out and figure what works best for you.
Yeah, it would take somebody 15 minutes to go through it and then just stand in your band room and go, yeah, I have that, or not really. That's not really in effect,
Yeah.
And I would just encourage people who aren't percussion specialists or don't feel like they've got a good handle on what's going on to check it out and just use it as a reference because I should also say it's not comprehensive.
Sure.
I'm sure I'm missing stuff, but I think it's a great starting point for getting yourself in order with your percussion gear.
So we were batting back and forth the idea of actually having Jackson walk us through like audio, how to actually change a snare drum head and strainer and all that. But you were probably wise in saying, everything you want to do for percussion maintenance can be found in very short YouTube videos.
Right. Yeah. And to be honest with you, if you're handy at all, which most band teachers are, all it needs is a 2-minute, YouTube view. You just search how to replace a snare drum strainer, or how to line up a snare drum, how to line up snares, or how to tune congas. I mean, whatever you need, there's really good. YouTube is an amazing resource.
Sure is.
Certainly for this, but there's all of that's out there, and yeah, I could struggle to explain how to do these things, but this stuff is so visual that I think that part is really important. So
That's
I encourage
smart.
anybody, instead of just, and I do see this, and I saw this when I went and serviced some of those schools, and even my own 2 schools here, that a lot of times something will break or need a part replaced, and instead of getting that part replaced or doing that service, which may only take an hour once you really get down to it, or even less, it just gets put on a shelf, or it gets put into storage and it doesn't get used anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really too bad, because it's not some foreign language. It's just neat, it's just a new thing about being a band teacher for you if you're not a percussionist.
Yeah, and most of the time you have a percussionist or at least a band kid who's super handy, who's going to be a future mechanic.
Right.
And a lot of times putting kids in charge of stuff like that on their own, is really helpful. A kid who's in charge of that. Yeah, one of the smart thing you do is you talk about scheduling a maintenance day for your students. That's a fun and unique learning opportunity. So instead of doing percussion that day, you're dealing with maintaining gear. So how do you do that?
Yeah, or you can even make it more of a party, like on a Saturday afternoon or something. You order pizza for everybody, and then instead of you replacing all of the heads on your drum line or hiring someone to do it, you can order the heads, obviously, but then you do one ahead of time, so you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then have your percussionists who are interested, or even any band kids who are interested, come in and learn how to do this properly. And suddenly you've got 10 sets of hands doing this work, and you can do the whole drum line in, 2 hours or 3 hours. And then the fine tuning can be done by your percussion teacher, or yourself, or a drumline captain, or whoever will do the fine tuning. But the actual physical labor that goes into some of that is really tough. And kids think that's super cool, especially younger kids, like eighth graders,
Mm-hmm.
freshmen, because it's usually something that they haven't done. Maybe they own a drum set at home,
Sure.
but it's just got heads on it and they've never had to or thought about replacing them. And now they will know how, and you can open up a ton of cool conversations about my drum set sounds like a cardboard box. Why? What can I do?
Mm-hmm.
Remember when you came in for that drumline maintenance day and we replaced the heads on the marching basses? Well, let's look at some drum heads, and you can ask your parents for your birthday for new heads, and you'll you'll go from a cardboard box drum set to a really nice sounding drum set in an afternoon.
Yep.
And I've had great success with that. I did it first with a personal drum set of mine. I was going to do the work myself, but I thought this is kind of cool. I could have some kids come in and I can show them how to do it. And then since then, I've done it with our drumline gear at the middle school. I did it with our new gear at the high school. Um, it's just been really great, and kids love it. So I encourage you.
Yeah.
I encourage you to do that if you're going to look to do that kind of service. To do
Love it. Love it. You also say a poorly functioning timpani are useless. Well-maintained ones are an asset. Yeah, we've all seen the timpani that don't work. And then sometimes they're easy enough to do, but like sometimes you get a really old set or it's hard to do that. So like,
Right.
yeah. Are there certain timpani that are like beyond, most repair? Or is it literally just about every set of timpani could be rehauled?
I don't know. And
Okay.
I think that comes down to me not being a real percussion like technician, I guess. I would call myself a specialist, but not a technician. So someone who is a percussion repair tech in a large music store might be able to answer that question better. I've worked on four or five sets of timpani in my time, and they've all been either the Ludwig fiberglass or Yamaha brass shell.
Mm-hmm.
And I have yet to encounter one that didn't wasn't serviceable. Some are really far out,
Yep.
and you need to slowly tighten the springs and then let them sit for a week, and then come back and do it again, and so you don't crack a spring or you don't crack the little tension rods on those fiberglass timpani. But all of that information, I didn't know any of it. And when it came down to servicing our timpani at our middle school a few years ago in Pulaski, I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, probably spent an hour watching videos, and then I ordered the things that I needed, and I set them in the back room and did it over the summer. And it took me probably a day, but
Mm-hmm.
that timpani sounds great now.
Yeah.
The pedals move smooth, the heads are beautiful new heads, and the kids love playing the timpani now because they sound great
Mm-hmm.
and they function correctly,
Yeah.
and it elevates the ensemble. So yeah, if your timpani's out of order, I would really encourage you to get it back in order fast, because it will be a huge asset to your program as opposed to be kind of a waste of space.
Yeah, and sometimes when you have to repair a percussion thing, like it's a general item that you can get anywhere. For example, I'm thinking about fishing line if you're dealing with triangles, right? Using fishing line instead of a string.
Yep.
And then when you want to restring a marimba or something, like going to the Army Navy store and getting what is called paracord, like paracord that's skinny enough to go through. There's stuff that you can get and then literally just do it yourself or with kids. And
Right.
yeah, YouTube is a wonderful place.
When I do every tension rod that I do, I put white lithium grease on them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like from Home Depot. It's not some special
Sure.
thing. It's just, yeah, a lot of it is trips to Menards or whatever, and you you save your receipt and you've got $24.95 worth of things, but then now you've got 4 more functional pieces of equipment for your program.
Yeah. Yeah. So in general, the repair versus replacement, sort of what's your philosophy with that?
Yeah. This is where it helps to have a knowledgeable person kind of render an opinion if you're not. I think that we did kind of make a list of, I'm cheating, I'm looking at my notes here, but we did kind of make a list of things that would be, now it's time to replace.
Yep.
So on any drum shell, if you've got a major crack, or if you've got warping to a drum shell, or dents in a metal shell, And if you're in a major city and you have a really valuable metal shell drum, like a bell brass snare or a hand hammered bronze shell or something, you're in a major city with a really good percussion repair tech, then you could get that you can get that fixed. But that's usually if you've got like the thing I think of is Ludwig acrylites is that you see them all over the place because they were a student snare drum in student kits for like
Hmm.
30 years. They're that gray Ludwig eight
Sure.
lug snare
Yep.
drum, and they've some of them are pebbled, like it's called an orange something coating, but they've got a pebbled surface or it's a smooth with a bead in the center of the shell. Those are great drums, but they're aluminum, and they're really prone to denting and warping. If they get dropped once, they kind of get smashed in.
Yep.
So those are hard to recover.
And
Usually not worth
yeah,
doing.
I do want to mention there's a difference between the shell and the rim, right? Because if you have a rim that's
Yes.
dented, the rim you can just buy a new rim. Like we just had lots of
Right.
times with your your marching bass drums, you do all the rim knocks and everything. If you don't have a rim guard on that, in 10 years you got to replace it and whatever. But
Right.
a rim is different from a shell.
Yeah. So if you've got dented or warped shells, typically it's time to go.
Yep.
If you've got damaged bearing edges, so the bearing edge on a drum, if you don't know, is once you take the head off, it is the lip of the drum that's got an angle to it that the
Hmm.
head sits on that edge or that rim or that lip, whatever you want to call it, but it's called the bearing edge. And if I don't even know how this would happen, it would have to have happened by real abuse. But sometimes you take heads off of drums and there's cracks or chips in the bearing edge,
Hmm.
and then it won't resonate the right way anymore. Sure, it will still sound like a drum, but usually that's not repairable unless it's some very valuable kind of piece. Then maybe look at it. But so
Sure.
that's a time to retire. And then if you've got this is kind of a safety thing for kids. If you've got you've got vintage equipment that had um, a chrome coating or aluminum drum that's got like a steel plate on the
Yep.
aluminum. Sometimes it flakes and it chips, and it can be really sharp. And there's a way to sandblast that off, but again, if you've got those sort of drums, it's time for those to go because if you have a kid accidentally grab it with their open hand, now you've got little flakes of chrome in their hand.
Yep.
That's really a problem. So you do see that. I saw we had a ton of them when I went through Menashe's gear, and we just got rid of them
Yep.
because they're no longer good for kids. But
I,
so that's go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, no, I had a brain wandering moment. I don't know why. I was just like, maybe it's the trumpet player in me. But you're talking, and I'm like, you talk about like reusing or recycling or resourcing something. About 6 years ago, I wanted to do fantasy on a Japanese folk song by Sam Hazo, and there's like this taiko drum part, right?
Yeah.
Well, like to buy a taiko drum, like a real one, it's like not gonna happen.
Yeah.
We're talking like thousands and thousands for like a real one. So
Hmm.
I found on YouTube this guy is like, hey, here's how you make a taiko drum. So I did it, and the thing sounds great. I mean, it's probably not like a real taiko drum, but it's this
Yeah.
big bassy sound. All you do is get an old tire and like 4 packages of packing tape, and you literally like
Awesome.
wrap it around,
Yeah.
like slowly rotating until it's like literally this covered thing and you can play them, and it almost sounds like a big deep bass drum, and it's
That's
like
awesome.
basically free. I went to
Yeah.
the closet at the secretary's office and got like a bunch of tape, and then I went to the hardware store and like, hey, you got an old tire, and they gave it to me, and yeah, so stuff like that's fun.
That's cool. Yeah, I kept stuff around a lot for essentially non-Western derived music, and you do need odd sounds or different depths and timbres of drums a lot for different stuff, and kids love that kind of music.
Mhm.
And in my previous district, we had an old Ludwig bass drum that kind of had like the mounts were stripped out, and they were like, "Can we get rid of this?" And I said, "No, let's just put it up on the shelf." And eventually, we did need. I don't know what the piece called for. It was Terracotta Warriors, which is kind of a grade
Mhm.
2.5. That's
Scott
a great
Watson,
piece,
yeah.
but it calls for like a second um, tribal drum sort of sound, and so we ratcheted the head on one side up super tight, took the other head off, and all of a sudden we had this perfect sound that we needed.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
so that's that. So in terms of repair, I would say that most things really can be repaired. if you're willing to put the resources to it. And refurbishing or rebuilding good high quality equipment is certainly less expensive than buying something brand new.
Yeah.
Especially if you can even get a hold of it. Like if you're trying to buy Yamaha gear right now in the US, good luck. I mean, it's a year wait on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. So if you do have a
but-
limited budget, which most of us do,
Yeah.
like what are the best places you say to spend that money? You said public facing pieces first, like drumline, service, concert, percussion.
Right. So I think this is really important. I heard who's your friend Jeff, right? That is
Yep.
your other co-host sometimes.
Jeff Smith. Yep.
Yeah. I heard him on a really early episode talk about how it's important for the band to be out in the community and be seen
Visual,
in positive performances or whatever it is.
Yep.
And so going along with that is all of your gear and all of your instruments. And drum line specifically is so primal. And people who are not musicians, are not percussionists, but certainly are not musicians, or maybe don't even have a kid in the program, they do understand drumline, and they think it's cool, and they think somehow it talks to their like inner human programming. So if you've got a limited budget and everything else is kind of in working order, and you have maybe some opportunity to spend some money, I would get that drum line looking and sounding good as your first step.
Yeah, and sometimes too, you're asked for a last minute, hey, can the marching band come to CVS and play the Halloween parade? And you're like, sometimes you can do it, and sometimes you can't. But you can send a drum line, and if they know a couple of riffs or part of their show or the cadence, and people think the band's there when it's like 10 kids.
Right.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah, totally. If you have high quality gear, like say you've got a Yamaha line that is 10 years old, and the rims, like you were saying, are all chipped up from the rim knocks, and your heads are 3 years old and they don't sound great anymore, and your harnesses are totally ratty. Instead of buying all new gear, if you had a limited budget, you could instead buy new heads, new rims, new harnesses as needed, and you could get new wraps to match your school colors. And you could, instead of spending 15 grand on a new line, you've spent 3 or 4, and you've got a new looking and new sounding line that would go another 5 to 7 years, and you'd gain a lot of ground doing that.
Brilliant.
There's a site, I think it's called 1-2 Wraps, On2 Wraps, something like that. But I'm looking at them to do for our line here, actually, because our drums are black, but our school colors are blue, and so it looks okay because black's neutral. But it'd be great if we had sparkly blue drums.
Sure.
So yeah, I would do public facing pieces first, and then get your main concert percussion pieces. Like you should have 2 functioning concert snare drums, certainly at the high school level. Ideally a metal drum and a wood drum, and ideally in 2 different depths, 5.5 inches, or 5 inches, or 5.5, or 6.5, or 8. If you've got a really nice, like 8-inch deep maple drum, that would be really nice. But I get that. I would do new heads on those, and make sure your concert bass drum is got nice heads, and your timpani.
Yep.
After that, everything else is can be on a next tier. It's not superficial, but yeah, that's what I would do. And then I've got just a little note that says upgrade your cymbals. An intermediate drum set with good condition heads, but with really nice cymbals sounds great.
Sure does.
As opposed to having kind of cheapo or intermediate cymbals with a really nice drum set. It doesn't sound the same. So I would if you're looking at new drum set or doing something with your drum set or your concert crash cymbals or whatever, I would look to do those cymbals before you buy all new drums.
Yeah, and I was thinking about a lot of times we have drummers who are like they start as rock drummers and then they learn jazz drum set, right? Because you're the expert, not me, but rock is mainly about the drums and jazz starts more about the cymbals. So those kids have to get used to what that feels like to play on the cymbals more than they play the drums.
Yeah, I was one of those kids, by the way. My buddy said in seventh grade, we were in a band already. I was the singer and he was the guitar player. And then the kid who was playing drums dropped out. And he said, well, we got to play for the middle school talent show. So you want to play drums? Like, I guess. I don't know how to play drums. I play trombone. Is that any good? He went, no, that's no good. So, yeah, we had a real crap drum set and really bad cymbals, but it was fun.
Yeah. Cool. I wanted to mention too, there's a great company that I've used for a long time called TapSpace. That's one word, TapSpace. They're out of California. And you can go on if you're looking for percussion ensemble music. You can filter it by, I've got 4 players at the easy level, and you can see scores, you can hear recordings, and a lot of times on YouTube you can watch people perform them too. So TapSpace is a great thing to buy 3 or 4 of the pieces and see which one works best for your kids. I've had a lot of luck with TapSpace, and now when you buy them, everything's download too. So once you buy it, you just have the PDFs and all that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So
hey,
Jackson,
can I say one more thing about this limited budget?
Yeah, do it.
So I think, and I'm looking at this right now with my new admin in Menasha, is when you're faced with needing lots of stuff, maybe, what do you do? And administrators really love it when you come to the table to those discussions instead of just asking, I need all this stuff. Can I have $48,000? They'll go, no. But if you can combine forces with your other support networks, like a parent group or community groups, to make a shared investment plan for a large purchase, your administration will be much more inclined to do that. So we have a soft plan going in Menasha to probably try to split some costs with local businesses and with the admin and a parent group. So one group is not, or the school is not having to face the full cost to get whatever you need.
Yep. And you can do it over multiple years. You can say, hey, over the next 5 years, let's spread this out, kind of thing.
Yeah. It works with trips too. If you're able to, have a parent group donate $100 for every student going on the trip and do a fundraising campaign, then you've got local businesses that will match it, and then kids can do fundraising within your program. Suddenly, every kid's got $300 already for their trip, and then the band budget might pick up a little bit. So that sort of combining elements can be really effective.
Yeah, when it comes to large purchases too, people understand the 10-year plan, the 20-year plan, because they deal with photocopiers, right? So it's like, we know that every few years photocopiers have to be done. So if you talk to them about, hey, I've got $100,000 worth of stuff here, every 10 years we should be spending 10 grand, to keep things going or whatever it is. So keep speaking the copier budget language really usually works for people.
Absolutely.
Cool, great. So Jackson, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
Best way to do that is just with my email. Should I give my personal or my school? What is best?
Man, it's up to you.
Well, I can give my personal email. And if I would love it, actually, it would just be fun for me if someone is listening and goes, oh my gosh, I have the scary closet. He talked about the closet full of stuff, and you want to throw me on a Zoom call, and I would just, if whatever, you're in Oklahoma or wherever you are, I'd be happy to look at it and just give my little opinion about generally what you need to do.
Yeah.
But my personal email is my name, Jackson, the letter P, and then my last name, Smith, @me.com, like it's me. So JACKSONPSMITH @me.com.
Awesome. It's been really fun. It's always nice to hang with another Smith band director. There's not enough of us in the world.
I thought about that this morning. It's like another Smith is going to be on this podcast.
That's right.
That's good.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director.